Alright, guys, thank you so much for joining me yet again in another Combat Canvas episode in which we will go over the main event and co-main event for this fight over there in Baku, Azerbaijan. It was actually a very good fight card. I actually had a great time watching it. And well, I do want to share my main thoughts on this fight card because really, I actually really enjoyed it. And this is something new that I'm gonna start doing, but I'm gonna give you guys my casual score for the card and then my hardcore card score for the card. Maybe I need to get an easier name for that. I didn't notice that it was gonna be such a tongue twister. But as you're seeing on the screen, I give it a 6 out of 10 in the casual score because for the casual audience, they would look at this at some of these fights and look a lot of clinch work and wrestling and control over damage that many people wouldn't enjoy. But overall, it did have finishes, wars, back and forths in a lot of fights. So that's what would give it a higher score. But given the lack of, name value, so to speak, I think the casual audience wouldn't really appreciate many of these fights, mainly because there isn't really a strong storyline or background or rivalry for many or if any of these fights, except for a rematch in female MMA. So generally, I don't think the casual score would be very high. I'm gonna be generous and give it a 6 out of 10. But when it comes to the hardcore card score, I'm gonna give it a 7.5 out of 10 because, like I said before, it did have action. There was a lot of technical skills displayed tonight or today, depending on your time zone. And really, I did enjoy very much this fight card, and I don't give it a higher score because considering that there is UFC 300 in the history of fight cards, I don't really want to go too high on this. But because it's a fight night, at the end of the day, it's not a pay-per-view. But in general, like I said, from the entertainment standpoint, and as a hardcore fan that I like to consider myself, I think I really enjoyed it, and it definitely passes. It gets a passing score for sure. Now, it's worth mentioning that there was some technical difficulties with the production team. If you guys paid attention, sometimes the fights were being introduced, you were hearing about the fighter's name and where they're from, and sometimes you wouldn't actually see the fighter's information on the screen, which is something very common, to just see their information, where they're from, their height, their weight and whatnot. And that was something that was not at all times available during this fight card, and I do believe that has a lot to do with the production team that they had over there. I'm not sure if the UFC took all their regular staff over there or not, but that was something I thought was interesting. Didn't really affect the flow of the card in general, I think, but if you paid close attention, you would notice that kind of happened at some point. But for being the first fight card over there in Baku, it was nice. The refereeing, however, is unacceptable. Some fights were just awful to watch in terms of the refereeing and enforcement of the rules. You would hear or you would see referees like giving a soft warning for a guy like eye poking and kicking the other guy in the nuts repeatedly. You saw kicks to the midsection, not to the midsection, but to the crotch of women, men as well. Today, for the first time, I found out that women also use a cup. I actually never thought about it, and it was kind of funny that even Bisping was saying in commentary that he wasn't sure if they would use a cup, right? So I guess we will have to get input from a female commentator on that, like they said. But for sure, they do use a cup. Like the way that sounded, that was just crazy. And in general, the refereeing was not very good. There was also some blatant fence grabbing to the point that sometimes it even stopped the possibility of takedowns. And the referees really were not all over it. They would give like I said, a soft warning or just... Finally, we'll talk about some fights in specific, but in general, I thought that was something that was an unfortunate highlight about this fight card. But talking about the positive, Baku looks beautiful. I hope the UFC goes back in there. The sides were beautiful. The crowds, were very hyped to have the UFC over there and those fighters to have them to support their locals. You can tell that they really support their locals, so that's very interesting and very good to see. I actually love that these fights occurred at a better time zone for me. For me to watch cards during the day, I really appreciate that very much, not to be so late watching the fights. And I do believe that the UFC takes some of their best talent and has some of their best talent coming from Eurasia and Middle East. So when they go over there, they make sure that they put very good solid fight cards, which I do appreciate and enjoy as a fan. And like I said, there's a lot of talent over there, so you don't even need to just put one, like the A side or B side from a local fighter from there. You can get both, the A and B side from Europe, Asia, Middle East, because there's really a lot of talent over there. So I really enjoy that. And now I do want to jump to the main event of the evening, guys. As a matter of fact, I was kind of excited about this fight. I'm glad that it got rescheduled, because like you saw, it was actually a very interesting fight. And when it comes to Jamahal Hill and Khalil Roundtree, it was really not Hill's best performance. He really got dominated. He got outstruck, knocked down, and really, like I said, dominated to a decision. His biggest weakness, you could tell, was the leg kicks. He was getting leg kicked all the time. He, of course, got hit to the face. I think, of course, Khalil took a lot of insight from the Jiri fight, where I believe that's where he has gotten the most hit. Hill has. And of course, he lost against Pereira, but when it came to the Pereira fight, he really got knocked out pretty easily. It makes you wonder really if Jamahal Hill is one of those fluky champions that just won at a very fortunate time, because he had the opportunity to face the literal oldest light heavyweight champion for the vacant light heavyweight championship. So the fact that he even vacated it, maybe gave him this idea that he never lost the title, that he still belongs, that he has to be back in the title conversation soon. But I think his career, he peaked too early. I don't think he learned all the lessons he needed to learn, and now he's doing so, or he will have to learn those lessons about improving his striking and whatnot, now that he's been through a lot of injuries with his Achilles heel and also his knees. So and those are just the disclosed injuries that he's shared with the public. Lord knows what else he's been suffering from, and on top of that, he faced a leg kicker from hell in Roundtree. So I think this was a really bad matchup, but the same you could have said about Jiri, the same you could have said about Pereira. And now what are we learning about Jamal? Does he really belong to the top 5, to the top 10 of the light heavyweight division? Not sure really. This is really not a deep division, but I don't think Jamal has a lot to bring to the table. He looked very good coming up. I'm not gonna take that away from him, but at this point, I'm very curious, if anything, to like I said, he will continue to be an entertaining fighter. You will continue to watch his fights, because either he's finishing somebody or getting finished. Something is gonna happen, right? But when it comes to his confidence, I really wonder what will this losing streak do to such a salty fighter, to a fighter that doesn't take L's very well. He was classy about the Jiri loss, clearly not about the Pereira loss, but now that he lost against a guy that he said was not on his level, that he was better than in every way, in every shape, in form. So I don't really know how Jamal is gonna come back from this, and it even opens the conversation to think, is Jamahal Hill chinny? Now, of course, Pereira, Jiri, and Roundtree, knockout machines. I get it, guys. Don't even start with me in the comment section. But again, these guys are also facing other guys that, are knockout machines. Jamal has a long history of knockouts. So it's not like Roundtree hasn't been KO'd before. You could say that he's chinny as well. He's lost to really not high-level fighters. Roundtree has. So what does this say about Jamahal Hill? Really? he's a young fighter. He doesn't have a long career, so he shouldn't really have all that much damage, and seemed like the more fucked up fighter out there fighting against the veteran, quote unquote. So, on the other side, I got Roundtree Jr. looking fast throughout the whole fight. He paced himself, which is something very, very new for me to see in Roundtree. He paced himself to a level that he would stay active enough to keep winning the fight and keep Jamal, respecting him. But on the other side, he didn't go for broke, right? He stayed patient. He picked his shots. He really was strategic about what he was throwing. He would wait for Jamal to switch stances to hit the same leg. And overall, well, he did kick both legs, but you could tell he was focusing on one leg more than the other, depending on the switch stance, and to keep him thinking about that. I think Roundtree Jr. Like forgot about the head kicks that I think he was setting up, because the first one he threw led to him like falling on his back and almost getting caught by Jamal. So he kind of realized that maybe that was not the best course of action. Plus Jamal is taller than him, so I think it was a good call not to keep going for the head kick, not to expose himself like that to another potential slip. But I really liked that he looked smarter out there, like higher fight IQ. You can tell he's listening to his corner. He took a lot of learning from that Pereira fight, and he could tell that with what he has applied and distributed along the fight, he could keep winning and getting to another title fight, right? That's what he learned, and he really implemented it in this fight. I think it was a fight in which we saw Khalil grow, really. So from the last fight he learned, but in this one he applied that against a way lower level fighter in Jamal, of course, comparing him to Pereira. Now, we can talk later at another time in another video how Roundtree would look against another top light heavyweights. That would be a very interesting conversation. For example, how he would do against Rakic, for example. That would be very interesting for me. But before going into any of that, I do want to say that maybe Roundtree is like maybe one fight away from a title shot. Given the state of the light heavyweight division, I wouldn't hate to see him fighting for the title next, given that there's really not a lot of action in light heavyweight, and Roundtree kind of has the popularity right now. There's a different champion, they haven't fought before. Roundtree has very good takedown defense. He's a striker just like Magomed. Early prediction, most likely I think Roundtree loses that fight, because I think Magomed is an even smarter and faster fighter with also good cardio and also good enough power to hurt or KO Roundtree. So initially I would still favor the current champion against him, but I would still watch the living hell out of that fight. And not saying that has to be the next move, but I wouldn't hate it at all. That's what I'm saying for sure. Lastly, I think it's worth mentioning that this potentially is one of the best Roundtree Jr. Performances ever. He did look like a more mature fighter, and I'm looking forward to see what's next for him. I'm actually really excited. He's making the light heavyweight division look more interesting. There's a lot of memes around him about his questionable rituals and like cults that he belongs to and shit like that. But we'll talk about that in another occasion. For now, we're gonna keep it sport related, and to that end, we're gonna go to the co-main event of the evening. In this case, when it comes to the co-main, it was a very, very good, interesting, technical, savage, gritty fight between Rafael Fiziev and Ignacio Bahamondes. I don't know why I didn't acknowledge the stats in the previous in the main event, but I guess I was so excited about what actually happened that I didn't want to jump into the numbers and whatnot. You could see those on screen, but yeah, you're also seeing Fiziev against Bahamondes numbers on screen. And well, let me give you my thoughts on it. Initially, I want to say that for me, in my opinion, this was kind of do or die for Fiziev, in the sense of him coming from a losing streak, coming from injuries, coming from questionable losses, and for him to now be back in the winning column against a prospect that looked very, very good in the UFC, a young guy as well. He's not getting back to the W column with an easy win. or the Sean O'Malley way, getting back to the top fighters without fighting back to the top. I know they're two very, very different fighters, but my point is he's earning his way back to the top, unlike other fighters. And in this case, when I initially heard about this fight being scheduled, I thought it was a horrible matchup for Visif, but he made a very valid point that he actually implemented during the fight. He knows Bahamondes is gonna go forward, and he definitely used that in his favor, Visif that is, because clearly the physical aspect in terms of the range would favor Bahamondes, but he really doesn't play the distance game. He doesn't play defense first. He really likes to go forward, attack, use a lot of flashy movements, which will comment in a moment, are not my favorite in a fighter that wants to be elite. But when it comes to Visif, he kept it very economical, landing his typical combinations of hooks with uppercuts, of course the leg kicks to different levels of the leg, body shots, leg body kicks as well. So in general, I think it was a very good performance by Visif, showing what he can do when he has a full training camp, showing what he can do when he knows his opponent and gets in good shape, when nothing goes wrong with an injury, when nothing goes wrong with the short notice and losing the cardio, and he showed he belongs. In this case, I'm really surprised about Visif's ability to prevent getting kneed on, or for Bahamondes to land an uppercut on him, given the height discrepancy. You can tell he prepared for that very well. He wasn't dipping, risking any of that, and I was very impressed as to how Visif implemented his grappling, his takedowns, his timing on the takedowns. He already has the skill of the timing. He knows how to time fighters to land strikes, to calculate where they're gonna be at, and he's translating those skills from being a Muay Thai expert into MMA by landing those takedowns on a fighter that you would think is tall, is difficult to take down. You know what they say about tall fighters, they're like tables, so difficult to take down, long limbs, this and that. None of that mattered for the 3-time Olympian gold medalist Rafael Visif. You know what I mean? He just went for it. He was like, fuck you, fuck your takedown defense, fuck the fact that I'm a Muay Thai fighter, I'm taking you down. Time after time again, he was like, oh, I can take you away like that? Well, let me give you another one, boy. And I think he's growing as a fighter. He's learning. He is, understanding that it looks good when you're taking the other fighter down, even if you don't land as many. And let me tell you something, I was actually impressed by Visif's ability to land ground and pound, to kind of control the position, to deliver damage. Not just, of course, not to like threaten with submissions and anything like that, but of course like to deliver damage. And when he was done delivering damage, he wouldn't stall the position. He would just get up, get away, and take it back to the feet, where he landed a lot of, like I said, body shots beautifully. He knew that the head was gonna be far to reach, or hard to reach a little bit, and although he did land to the face of Bahamondes, clearly the game plan was more on the legs, on the body, and the rest would open up. Really, really a good performance by Visif, who of course took some shots. Of course, you're fighting a very good striker in Bahamondes, but definitely a performance where Visif saves his career, puts it back on track where he needs to have it. He's not a spring chicken anymore. He's not in his early 20s, not even mid 20s. He's in his early 30s, going for going to the top. And many people were suggesting him to move down to featherweight, as maybe he was outsized in lightweight. Well, the fact that he's out there taking his opponents down, outstriking or landing the better shots against a longer, taller fighter, maybe the tallest active fighter in lightweight right now, that really puts a stop for now to a lot of the rumors that he needs to switch or to go down to featherweight. At least for me, it does. It showed that he can go the distance in 3 rounds. We still have to see if he can do that in 5 rounds, with elite fighters. But honestly, I'm very excited about what the future holds for Fisif, and I think he's gonna do very, very well, rounding up his game, showing fight IQ, and getting back, like I said, to the win column. When it comes to Bahamondes, like I said, I think he's still young. He will come back better than ever. I think he might start using his range better, because being the longer fighter, I don't think it was the smartest choice today to go and fight the shorter fighter like the way he did. Maybe one of the learning experiences that Bahamondes and his team are gonna take from this is gonna be the fact that he could use his distance better, that he doesn't need to put himself in the pocket or in there and take as much risk. Maybe, you know, that could change his style and how entertaining it is, but he's being, in my opinion, way too flashy. That's good at the beginning when you need to get to the top, but when you are at the top already, or on your way to get there, or fighting guys that have fought at the top and have that experience and have, you know, that level of danger inside of the octagon, you need to be smarter and round up your game in a way that wins you fights. Because the time to get finishes and flashy finishes is at the beginning, and if it happens later, it's great, but you need to have a solid plan if you're gonna go to fight the top guys. And in this case for Bahamondes, I think he was just not ready to fight the range game. Is not what he's been doing, is not what brought him here. But I think that would be a good weapon, or a good approach rather, to use his weapons in his favor and not allow these shorter guys, which are pretty much all guys, get to him like that, right? Bahamondes doesn't have like the strongest power when it comes to his knockout shots. He is very fast. His main advantage is that he can land a lot of strikes from a longer distance than you can, and he definitely should capitalize that. Of course, he's very greedy. He was always in the fight, taking shots and delivering and throwing back. But honestly, he needs to be smarter and use his physical attributes better. If you ask me, I would say that's the main learning experience from this fight, and I do hope to see both fighters back. Honestly, I'm very glad to see Rafael back in the winning column, because he's a fighter I love to love. You know what I mean? So glad to have him back in the win column. And now we go down to the fight between Curtis Blaydes and Rizvan Kuniev. Of course, guys, Kuniev is not exactly a star that you and I would be like talking about on the regular, but honestly, what brings this fight to my attention, that brings me to bring it to your attention, is the fact that Curtis Blaydes fought in it. You know, for me as a Curtis fan, you know, I like to see Curtis doing well. And for me to see him win this fight, even if it was a split decision, makes me happy. You know, I don't want him falling off like that against a guy that I believe was doing his debut. Blaydes landed way many more strikes, landed takedowns, as you can see in the stats on screen. You know, the significant strikes was actually pretty similar between the two, but Curtis was the way more active fighter. I think he used his experience, stayed active. There was moments where Kuniev was landing very hard shots, and I was like yelling to my TV, telling Blaydes to freaking move his feet, bro. Like he was just getting there like a body bag, just getting hit, getting punched to the face. Bro wasn't moving. He was dazed. Bro, I think those Francis Ngannou fights did serious damage, you know what I mean? That uppercut from hell from Derrick Lewis did some serious damage, because how the fuck do you not move when the other guy is landing like this heavyweight, you know, for a heavyweight, those were soft punches, but we're still talking about heavyweight punches. So it was tough to look at Blaydes just standing there, and I think he did use his experience, his takedown ability and whatnot to win this fight. But given that, you know, they were fighting over there closer to Russia, which is Kuniev's you know, native country, I would have thought that in a situation as close as this, the American wouldn't have taken the win. But here we are, you know. Maybe that proves me wrong in the sense of the UFC judges being absolutely sold. So, you know, gives me some hope that there's still fairness. It was a very close fight, and could have gone either way, you know. Now, my final thoughts on this fight card, besides of the scoring that we gave to it and the overall thoughts, is the fact that well, I don't know if you guys watched the post fight conference where Dana White announced that Jon Jones is literally retiring from the sport. I cannot say that I didn't see it coming at all, because Jones has been incredibly inactive lately, and he's been, just like he says, living his best life. But for Dana White to announce it like that, most likely, you know, I don't think Jones ever wanted the Aspinall smoke. And, you know, at least, guys, at least I'm glad that we finally have some closure on this. I think Aspinall knew days ago that Jones was retiring. He hinted at it when he said that he was training for either, I think he said Volkov or Gan, which I'm very happy is the case, because honestly, for as much as Jones is a legend of the sport and whatever you want, for as much as, you know, I wanted to see the Jones versus Aspinall fight, I'm so glad that they finally moved on from that we as a fan base can finally move on from that, guys, because it's been a long time coming that we've been waiting for that fight. And at this point, I had honestly lost interest in it, just like many other fans of the sport. So like I said, I'm glad that we're over the Jon Jones Aspinall discussion, and that now we can move on for an actual you know, or move on to have a actual active heavyweight champion, undisputed heavyweight champion, which Aspinall already is. So I know this is not exactly related to the fights that we watched, but it occurred right after this fight card, so I thought it was very interesting to hear you know, this being announced like that, and that finally for what remains in the year, we'll be able to have new heavyweight contenders fighting for the title, new action, new heavyweight fights. For me, it's one of my favorite divisions. I know it's not the highest skilled, but I just love heavy punches and heavy punchers going at it. So as long as that's happening, I'm happy and I'm gonna be there. And I'm glad that the division is back. For as good as Jon Jones is, he was holding this division back, and I'm glad that the fan base is taking a W in this sense, you know. So without much more to say, guys, I appreciate all of you who watched till the end, who watched you know, all my thoughts on this fight card. I appreciate you for joining the channel, whether you're watching when it was recently released or later. I appreciate you all. Please subscribe, please leave a comment with your thoughts and comments on what I'm sharing with you guys. If you subscribe, if you leave a like, that really helps with the algorithm. Get me into the algorithm, into the MMA YouTube content algorithm. We're gonna keep it coming with more fight analysis, comments, opinions, news, and all of those things that you guys love and I do as well. And I really hope you have a good night, day, afternoon. Blessings.